have his say because he didn't say the GM would ultimately make the ultimate decision. He basically said he's going to make the decision, but the GM is going to have some say so in that. So reading in between the lines, I get the feeling that Champ Kelly, I won't say he has a job, but I would say he's the front runner right now. With Antonio Pierce and Mark Davis admit that he's still learning new things about Antonio Pierce. I think when Antonio Pierce was promoted to interim head coach, he said he didn't know much about Antonio Pierce. So he's still learning about Pierce as not only a head coach and interim, but a person. And I think that's going to play into his decision at the end of the season. But let me tell you, Scott, there are a lot of people out there telling me that the decision's already been made. That Mark Davis doesn't want to blow anything up, and it's all said and done. The hay's in the barn, and Champ Kelly's going to be the GM, and Antonio Pierce is going to be the head coach. Now, of course, Mark Davis has to go through an interview process, so he's not going to say even if he
Right.
has made the decision. But I think it's plausible to believe that he's going to keep his options open because, as I said last year, he settled on Josh McDaniels before the offseason hit, and he admitted that was a mistake, not keeping an open mind. And I think he's going to stick to his word this time and actually keep an open mind and an open search.
Yeah, it certainly seemed that way from the interview, and he also talked about you talk about some of the things. Now, of course, when I say this, what Mark Davis said in this interview, of course, we're going to get some people out there won't believe it because everybody thinks some people are lying and all this kind of stuff. But he said we heard this narrative, right? We heard stories reported that Josh McDaniels had oversight on player personnel, and he said no to C.J. Stroud, and they were going to go to Bryce Young. Mark Davis said that's not true. Mark Davis today said that, in essence, Dave Ziegler had all the call on the player personnel moves. So some of that, and this is what I like. You know, most owners do a little more media than Mark Davis. I wouldn't say a lot. Depends on the ownership group. But with all that's transpired, it was good to see, and I'm glad Mark Davis decided to speak to somebody because I think you had to dispel some of those rumors. And I'm sure that's why, too. All this stuff about Rich Bisaccia and John Gruden, all that stuff. Now, they didn't talk about that, but they did. The question about Dave Ziegler and the moves and player personnel, which Mark Davis also said he intimated he also has input there as well, by the way, in the interview. So, but it was good to clear that up, too, because there's been conflicting reports, and now we have it right from the owner that was not the case.
I understand exactly what he was saying, though, but this is why I said I didn't give Dave Ziegler a pass for the mess that the Rays are in right now. Is you are the GM, right? And even in the introductory press conference, he said he was going to have personnel. He's going to make personnel decisions. Now, the reports that came out about it was all Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler was just a backseat driver.
Right.
I kind of looked at that with the side eye because even if that was the case, if Mark Davis says, Ziegler, you are the GM, you have the power to make these decisions, it's upon Ziegler to insert his power. If you let the head coach run all over you and make the decisions, that's on you. Because you have the right to exercise your power too. Mark Davis puts you in that position. And for you not to exercise that power, that's on you. That's not on Mark Davis.
Right. Exactly. And that's the thing. People have personal responsibility and you have a job, you're given a job. And so if that's not what you're doing, then that's on you, to your point. But interesting. Okay, let's dive in, Mo, to what we wanted to talk about here too, and we'll do that over the first two segments because I think it's worthy. Mo's piece today on sportsnot.com is a great one because I think there are, when we look at the final 4 weeks of the season, what are the questions that need to be answered? What can the Raiders do? Also, for all of you saying, sit this guy, sit that guy, Max Crosby made it very clear this afternoon. If you saw the video or saw the quote from Vinny Bonsignore over at the RJ, he said, what, are you effing kidding me? No, we're pros. We play 17 games. We go out there and we do what we want to do. So anybody, again, these are all weird situations where people project their own feelings into the discussion. That's not how professional athletes are built. They don't go out there and say, well, we're not in the playoffs, so we're going to go out there and just lollygag. It's not how it works. And it was good to see him say that. But there are questions to be answered. We talked about them last episode, Mo, about players, the roster, and things like that. So let's run through what you wrote about on Sportsnet. The first thing you talked about was a hot topic this week up until a few hours ago when all the NFL insiders started breaking that Aiden O'Connell most likely is going to start I didn't really think that was not going to happen, and no one has called. We talked on the show about the last game when the Raiders couldn't move the ball of putting Garoppolo in the game, not to permanently unseat Aiden O'Connell, because you and I have been very clear on this show that he should start the rest of the way. There's no doubt about that. So you posed that question in your column too about should the Raiders bench Aiden O'Connell, and the answer was no. Talk about why, because I don't see anybody calling for that, period. But let's make sure we address it and why you don't go to Jimmy Garoppolo. There are many, many reasons. And the biggest reason to me is because you need to see Aiden O'Connell play.
Believe it or not, there are people out there calling for Jimmy Garoppolo. But it just doesn't make any sense from multiple perspectives. One, Jimmy Garoppolo is not the future. I believe the Raiders are going to move on the first chance they get from Jimmy Garoppolo. So that's one. Two, as I mentioned earlier, the Raiders will be on the hook for $11.25 million for an injury guarantee if he gets hurt or cannot pass the physical March 18, 2024. That's number two. Three, Aiden O'Connell could be your backup of the future. So right now is the time he can get those meaningful snaps in live action against the Chargers, against the Chiefs, against the Colts, against the Broncos. You let him play out the season because then you figure out, okay, is this guy good enough to be our solid backup for the long term? Whoever the starting quarterback is for 2024, is Aiden O'Connell good enough to be number two? And I think that 4 games gives him enough time to, again, get those meaningful snaps in the regular season. So the Raiders have to figure out not just what Aiden O'Connell is, because they've been doing that since Antonio Pierce took over and gave him the job in Week 9 against the Giants, but now they have to figure out where does he fit in their future if he does fit in their future. Is he the future backup? Is he good enough to push whoever comes into that quarterback room in 2024? We'll find out. And I think him having his best game passer rating wise against the Chiefs was big for Aiden O'Connell. Now coming out of the bye, didn't play so well. So I'm interested to see how he bounces back. And that's why it made no sense to start Garoppolo against the Chargers, because you want to see how the kid bounces back from a bad game. And I think that will tell you a lot about how he will progress and how he's able to handle tough situations and step into tough situations. Because if he's the backup, guess what? If the starting quarterback goes down, he's got to be able to be composed, step in, and lead that team to victory. And I think going into these last 4 games, it'll show you about how he deals with pressure, how he deals with ups and downs. And I think he spoke about it at the podium. He said he doesn't make football everything because it'll bog you down if you make football everything. He's still trying to have fun with the game while learning on the job, and I think that's important.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And that's what you got. I mean, look, we've talked about, and we had some of our listeners and viewers get mad at us, Mo. They're mad because we talked about Aiden O'Connell being his lack of mobility, which is his big downfall, right? As far as, or I shouldn't say downfall, it is his big weakness in today's NFL, especially when you don't have a great offensive line in front of you. But that said, he still needs the time. There's nothing like live first team reps in the NFL, especially for a quarterback like that. And he had a bad game. Listen, he's had good games too. It's not like he's looked that way all along. And you're like, wow, I don't even know if this guy's going to make it as a backup. So it's good that Antonio Pierce. Now he might have made him want him to sweat a little bit, just to kind of send a point and say, hey, be on your P's and Q's and make sure you're ready to go against the Chargers tomorrow night on Thursday. But that said, there's no reason not to play him, and because, like you said, Garoppolo, Hoyer are not in your future, and unless he went down with an injury, God forbid, then there's no reason to put anybody else in there. In fact, as bad as it would be, I would make Hoyer your number 2 quarterback and make Garoppolo inactive because, to your point about $11.25 million, what are you going to do? So we'll see what they do there on game day tomorrow when it comes. All right, so that's the first one. Anything else, Mo, on that situation with Aiden O'Connell and the quarterback? I mean, look, the Raiders need to draft a quarterback, but in the interim, you're right. They need to. He's developable. I mean, he can develop into, I believe, a very good quarterback in the NFL, backup quarterback at the very least. And then maybe he surprises. Maybe he somehow gets more fleet of foot. We'll see.
You don't gain athleticism with age. I'm just going to put that out there. But
I just don't want anybody to get mad at us.
Look, I don't care who gets mad at us. The NFL is trending in a direction where you need a functioning mobile quarterback, and a lot of people have said, "Well, Mo, you changed your." I saw a comment on YouTube. You changed your definition of functioning mobile. I would say go back into my Twitter. I've been very consistent about what a functioning mobile quarterback is. It's not a running quarterback because a lot of people, as soon as I said functionally mobile quarterback, they start naming Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. That's not what I mean because those
No.
are the two quarterbacks that rush for the most yards among starters in the league. It's not what I mean. Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, CJ Stroud, all functionally mobile quarterbacks. They're also pocket passing quarterbacks. That's what I'm talking about. A quarterback who can throw from the pocket, but also move when he has to move in case his offensive line isn't blocking well. Very simple. It's not complicated.
No, it's not. Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. But Aiden O'Connell going to start against the Chargers on Thursday night. So we'll see how that all rolls out and see if if he bounces back. Now, staying on the offense, one of the things that I've heard consistently, and I agree with it, is that Bo Hardegree struggled. Here is a guy calling the offense who's not done it before. Okay, so we talk about the lack of experience for Antonio Pierce being a coordinator or head coach, which is true. Bo Hardegree has no experience doing that at all either. He has not been a play caller. Outside of what looks like scripted plays in the first series of each game, he struggles, especially in with situational awareness when the offense is struggling. You know what to dial up to get things moving, and a lot of fans have taken out their frustration on him. He was put into a weird position because again, he's had zero experience doing that. But you have an alternative, and that is Scott Turner. Why don't they turn over the play calling to Scott Turner? Is that something that's on Antonio Pierce, or what would make that happen, Mo? I mean, is that something that we would see? Would he would announce that? I mean, we saw Bo Hardegree do the press conferences this week, so nothing's changed there. Tell us why it would be good, maybe a good opportunity to try it out and see what Scott Turner can do.
First of all, I want to say Scott Turner isn't the golden boy of offensive coordinators out there. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying he's a top 10 coordinator or he's going to fix everything wrong with Raiders offense. All I'm saying is that he can't be any worse than Bo Hardegree. And he ran the Washington Commanders offense for 3 seasons from 2020 to 2022. Washington's offense was no better than, I believe, 20 in yards or points scored. Again, not great, but the Raiders right now are 28th in scoring and 29th in yards. Worse than that. So it can't be any worse than what Bo Hardegree is doing. And at least Scott Turner has some play calling experience where Bo Hardegree has none before this year. So I suggested Scott Turner. Edgar Bennett is the other former offensive coordinator on staff, but he was under Mike McCarthy in Green Bay, and that was Mike McCarthy's offense. So when it comes to actually calling plays and running an offense by yourself, not by yourself, but being the primary play caller, Scott Turner has that experience. So I feel like if the Raiders are going to make a change, and it will have to go through Antonio Pierce because he is the interim head coach. The head coach makes that decision who calls the plays if it's not him.
Right.
I vividly remember in Carolina when before the Panthers fired Frank Wright, he handed over play calling duties to, I believe, his offensive coordinator, who was also, I believe, coached running backs recently. Didn't go well, and he took play calling duties back. Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia, he handed offensive play calling duties to Shane Steichen in the year that the Philadelphia Eagles, I think, they had a first round exit in the playoffs. They got to the playoffs the first year under Nick Sirianni. He handed over play calling duties to Shane Steichen. It was a first round exit. I believe they lost to Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But Shane Steichen turned into one of the top offensive coordinators in the league. Look at what he's doing with the Indianapolis Colts right now. So again, that decision to hand over who gets the play calling duties on offense or on defense goes to the head coach. In this case, for the Raiders, the interim head coach and Antonio Pierce. So if a change is made, he would have to make that decision.
Yes, he would. And we haven't heard that that's going to happen this game, but again, there's 4 weeks left. We'll see what happens with that. Okay, for our audio folks listening to us on Odyssey or Apple, wherever you get the podcast, we're going to take a quick break. For those of you watching us live on YouTube, we're not going anywhere, but we'll be back for the audio folks right after this message. Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast. Don't forget, if you don't already subscribe, please do so wherever you get your audio. We'll be right back. And for our live audience, we're already back. See, look at that. But Mo, okay, we're going to go on. So we got through the first two questions that we're asking about what the Raiders need to kind of do, or what can they address in the final 4 weeks of the season. And we talked about Aiden O'Connell. Got to start him, let him go the whole way through. No sense in not doing that. Number two was perhaps turning over the play calling duties on offense to Scott Turner because Bo Hardigree just hasn't been able to break through on that one. Third now was something we talked about earlier in the show, which is, and I know you talked about this on your Bleacher Report Live earlier as well, which is this idea that the Raiders should shut down their good players. Max Crosby's had a knee injury. Anybody in their right mind who thinks Max Crosby, if he can play, is not going to play is crazy for number two. Number three is Josh Jacobs as well is going to play out there. Josh Jacobs does not know where he will play next year. There's a good chance the Raiders could sign him depending on who the head coach is. And there's a good chance he could be gone as well. So he's got a lot to play for. When you look at this idea around sitting players because of injuries, now if they have serious injuries, look, Colton Miller now into his third game, basically missing time. We might not see Colton Miller the rest of the season. We don't know yet. He was not put, obviously, on reserve, but he's there. Now we have Andre James injured. So we're going to see what happens there. But talk about this kind of idea that you should sit players, unless there's a serious injury, that you should sit players because you can't make the playoffs.
I'll say this because this has got a lot of discussion. So I reposted Max Crosby saying it's basically BS for the Raiders to shut down players who could play. And I'll break it down this way. I understand from the fan perspective that you want a better draft pick because it gives you better access to top quarterback prospects. I totally get that. But you also have to understand it from the player side. Max Crosby's knee is about to explode, right? Do you think he wants to hear, yeah, we're going to shut it down. You're healthy, but we're going to shut it down. Other players who aren't as, I won't say wealthy, but don't have the contract of Max Crosby. Think those players want to shut it down, especially if they have contract incentives. There are certain escalators in contracts, even for the non-borderline players. Some of the solid players, Jacoby Myers may have an escalator we don't know about. If he gets a certain amount of catches, he gets more money, right? The other thing is a lot of these guys are still working for their job. So if they're not with the Raiders next year, they're going to be looking to sign with another team, and they're going to want the most money they can get. And the only way they can do that is if they produce. Just remember, I understand Josh Jacobs is hurt, has a quad injury right now, but he's going to be a free agent. He's going to hit the market if the Raiders don't re-sign him. So he's going to need he's going to need his numbers to look fairly good before he becomes a free agent. So you have to take all of these things into account. For the people who out there who say shut certain players down or the Raiders should tank, it's just not in a competitive athlete's vocabulary to do that for so many reasons that some of them that I just named. As I said, for the people who want the Raiders to tank, can you imagine going to Max Crosby or Max Crosby noticing that you're benching certain players to get a higher draft pick? How do you think that's going to make him? How do you think that's going to rub Max Crosby? That's not going to rub him the right way. And I don't think Davante Adams wants to see that either. Davante Adams actually went to the podium recently and said, yeah, we're 5-8, but the playoffs still aren't out of the picture. Now,
no, it's not mathematical, no.
Mathematically, no, but realistically speaking, the Raiders are not making the playoffs. But it just goes to show that guys like Davante Adams and Max Crosby, who are your leaders in the locker room, they're not in favor of all this talk about tanking and shutting down players. It's just not in their DNA as competitive athletes. Right. So what I'm saying is I understand from the fan perspective wanting the higher draft pick, but you also have to understand from the player's perspective all the preparation they put in during the week, playing through injuries. You think they want to hear about a draft pick? No, they want to go out there and win.
Right. That's what you play the game for. I mean, yes, they're getting paid. Don't get me wrong, but they want to win. I mean, when you, like you said, when you abuse, I'm going to use the word abuse. When you abuse your body to play in the NFL, because that's what you do. I mean, it's a beating. It's a beating. If you see these guys on a Monday after a game, some of them can barely move around. I mean, that's how rough of a game it is. And so when you tell them, just lose them, nah, you can't do that. Like it's not to your point, it's not in their DNA. So I'm glad you addressed it because I understand the draft pick perspective, but it is what it is. Look, you're not so terrible, and if they were that terrible, people would already be checked out. The reason they're not is because you have guys. Even if the Raiders aren't winning games like they should or scoring points, this team has not quit. You can see it on the field. We've seen people quit over time. You saw Marcus Peters quit; he got cut. The rest of these guys are playing hard.
Scott, there's another thing I want to bring up here because a lot of people are talking about the draft pick. We want a higher draft pick. We want a higher draft pick. I think more important than the draft pick, where you're picking, 11, 13, 15, 8, whatever the case is. It's more important who's making the picks. I'm old enough to remember the Raiders in 2019 drafting two defensive ends. One was the fourth overall pick in the draft, and one was a fourth rounder. Guess which one looks like the better player, the much better player? The
Yes.
fourth rounder. So you can pick fourth, you can pick second, you can pick eighth, and still whiff on the pick if you don't have a good GM or scouting personnel department to make sound decisions on draft day. I'm not
Right.
saying wait till the fourth round to get your quarterback, but what I'm saying is whether you're eighth in the order or 14th, that GM, that scouting department has to get the right pick. Because you can pick eighth and get and whiff, and the team that picks 14th may hit a home run on that quarterback.
Right.
So to me, more important than the draft order, who's making the picks?
Yes. Great point. And also when it comes to the draft, you look for the Raiders to move into the top five, because I think they could get up to six if they lost this week. I think I got to double check that.
I believe there's
But
six now.
yeah, there's six now. That's right. So to move up any further, you're talking probably the Raiders don't win another game, right? I mean, realistically, they'd have to go 0-4 here. And so for those of you who would like to see Coach Pierce come back, but then you want the you want the better draft pick, I don't think you're going to get both of those. So you got to decide which one you like the most. And so I look at that, and you think about people like Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels now, who I think has quickly moved up. I don't know if he's the number 2 quarterback, because Drake May is still pretty regarded amongst scouting reports. But those three guys could be gone in the first 4 or 5 picks. So a lot of people are saying, well, then we'd have to trade up. You can only trade up if people want to trade down. And right now, by my count, 6 teams need quarterbacks, like desperately. There's actually more, but 6 of them have no quarterbacks, like nobody. So to me, there's no guarantees, and you just don't know what's going to happen. And to trade up, you could say trade all your draft picks, get up there, because you got to get Jaden Daniels, you got to get Caleb Williams. You got to find a partner. It's like you can be at the dance, and if you keep asking around and nobody will dance with you, you can't dance. You have to dance by yourself.
Here's what's working in the Raiders' favor as far as if you're someone who wants them to trade up for a draft pick if they're outside the top 10. The Chicago Bears are likely going to have 2 top 10 picks. They have the Carolina Panthers pick, which is 1 right now, and they have their own pick, which is number 5. So even if they draft a quarterback with their first pick, right, they may want to trade down and get more draft capital to help that quarterback, whoever he is, with
Yeah.
their second first round pick. And that could be a pick that the Raiders may be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's an opportunity, as long as the Bears stay at the top of the order. Now they've been winning games lately. Lo and behold, they're 5-8, just like the Raiders, but they've been on a streak lately. But if they stay within the top 10 with both their picks, the Raiders will have an opportunity to call them up and say, "Hey, we understand you drafted your quarterback. You want to trade back and acquire more draft capital to help that young quarterback, or you can sit there at 5 and make a pick, but we're interested in moving up."
Yeah. Yeah. No, and there's all sorts of things I can do. You're absolutely right. By the way, because we usually record the show and then premiere it and then take part in the active chat, even though the show isn't quote unquote live, tonight is live. So we're live. So MDM, our good friend in Hawaii, is like, is this live or is it? It's live. We're here. We're right
Live.
now. It's live. Yes. You have us live tonight because of the game tomorrow. So we figured we'd give you the video early, because you'll be watching the game tomorrow. You're not going to watch a video tomorrow. So we'll do it tonight, and then the audio will be out tomorrow. So there you go. I mean, again, I think that the scenarios in people's head, listen, I understand. It sucks that you have to move to that conversation, but that's what the conversation is now with the way the Raiders are at 5-8, is you start talking about draft picks. So that's how it goes. But if you look at what else is going on, we saw this past game, even as terrible as it was from an offensive perspective, we saw some really nice bright spots on defense. We saw, of course, what Max Crosby did. We saw them hold the Vikings, who are not an offensive juggernaut, but they're also not awful, to only 3 points. And one of the performances that was very, I think, I was glad to see at least, was Tyree Wilson. Tyree Wilson, they've been moving him inside as like a hybrid tackle defensive end. And it really seems to be working. Now, he had his best game so far as a pro against Minnesota. Talk about that and whether or not you think that is really what he ends up doing, or is that just a stopgap from now until maybe training camp when he can get a full camp in and maybe go back to just playing end?
No, I think that should be his role. He should be a hybrid defensive tackle, defensive end. Because I talked about this when he was first selected
Yeah.
at 7, that he has the body type to move inside in sub packages. Now the Raiders did that a little bit with him against the Miami Dolphins. According to PFF, he played 3 snaps in the B gap. According to PFF, he had 10 snaps in the B gap against the Vikings. And as you said, a lot of people will agree with you on this, that he had his best game. I believe he had 4 tackles, a sack. He had 3
Sack.
quarterback hurries along with that too. So
Yeah.
you're seeing the progress with him being able to move him around, his versatility, and I think that's what the Raiders saw in him when they drafted him at 7. Not only
Yeah.
can he line up outside, but he can help out inside and help give a pass, because the Raiders have been looking for an interior pass rush for how long now? How long has it been since the Raiders have been looking for
Forever.
that defensive tackle? Now, he's not going to be a full-time defensive tackle, but he can give you some help on the inside, which is much needed to help complement Max Crosby on the outside.
Right. And this is why you and I look, I said, what is it, 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, maybe now, that I was disappointed in him, but I didn't call him a bust. I said that he's going to have to turn it on towards the end of the season and then next year kind of prove it out. So again, so for those people who've come into the show, and I'm watching the chat go by tonight, I don't see anybody else. I'm sure there'll be somebody who says it, that Tyree Wilson's a bust. Well, he's not. He's come along, and to your point about the hybrid role, I think as most people expected him to be the opposite of Max Crosby on the other side and be the pass rushing defensive end. He's going to be a little bit of both. And to your point, that's where you develop him. And we'll have to see if Patrick Graham gets to stay, then that'll be good for Tyree Wilson because they have the familiarity. But if they end up going with a different coaching staff, I still believe after watching the film, that's exactly where they're going to put him.
Here's the thing, and this is why I advocate for, now this is all up to the head coach, but I
Yeah,
would want Patrick Graham to stay on as defensive coordinator, because
absolutely.
a lot of people are assuming just because the Reds hire a head coach that they're going to have a whole new staff. That's not necessarily true. I use this example plenty of times. The Colts fired Frank Wright and Jeff Saturday. They kept Gus Bradley. Well, Shane Steichen decided to keep Gus Bradley on that staff. Gus Bradley is still the defensive coordinator. He's with the previous regime. So it's not a full-blown conclusion that new head coach means new coordinators. Now, of course, you want to replace Bo Hardegree, but I think Patrick Graham is doing a good enough job that he can possibly hold on to his spot. I wouldn't even shock me if Antonio Pierce stays on as a position coach, because as I said on the X today, Antonio Pierce has done a fine job with the linebacker core. He is a
Absolutely.
linebackers coach. So Robert Spillane having his best year as a pro, Divine Diablo being a solid starter, Luke Masterson making plays here and there. That's a product of, and part of a product of Antonio Pierce's coaching. So I think when you look at the dynamics of this team, of course it comes down to what the head coach wants, but I don't think you want to throw out everything with this team. As you said, while the Raiders didn't score any points against the Vikings, holding the Vikings to 3 points, pretty good job for that defense. And the way the defense has just been playing overall. Now we'll see what they look like. I wouldn't say the Chargers are a measuring stick with Easton Stick without Keenan Allen, but we'll see what it looks like against the Chiefs. Because remember, the Chiefs put up 31 on the Raiders not too long ago. So we'll
Yes.
see what it looks like on Christmas. The Colts are a pretty good offense. I believe the Colts are top 10 in scoring.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a tough challenge. The Broncos are a different football team. So Patrick Graham his unit is going to play a lot of formidable offenses. And I think that's a big test. And it could be an audition for whoever the new head coach is to say, okay, maybe Patrick Graham is good enough to keep it. To your point, the reason why you want to keep that continuity is because you don't want that new head coach or new defensive coordinator coming in and saying, oh, Tyree Wilson doesn't fit my system. Trayvon Merrick doesn't fit my system. Devon Diablo doesn't fit my system. We got to get rid of these guys and get my guys.
Yeah.
I think the continuity there on the defensive side of the ball is very important.
Right, and they finally have made progress on that defense, right? So to your point, it makes so much sense, and it does come down to who the head coach is. If Pierce is not the head coach, then and you go, let's say, with a coordinator who's bumping up to head coach in his first time, whatever, I think it's more probable that it happens because those guys walking in, hey, I don't have to worry about the defense. He's got it rolling, he's got it going. Versus if it's a Jim Harbaugh or somebody like that, they tend to be want to bring in their own people and do their own thing and not inherit folks. So I think that's something too that's going to play into the decision of Mark Davis as well. You don't decide on your head coach because you want to keep the DC, but I think if they go the younger route, if they go the less experienced coordinator route, then obviously Patrick Graham would have a leg up because it's like, hey, that's one thing you don't have to worry about. The system's in place. They have players there. They've made progress, especially if they finish strong. So that would make all the sense in the world. Sorry. I'm going to move on. I'm going to read some of the chat here real quick. Oh, they're talking about Jamarcus. Oh, no. Uh-oh. You guys, what are you talking about Russell for?
I saw a comment, I think it was GB Ware had a comment and was saying, would I be okay with old Bull Nix or JJ McCarthy being the quarterback? And to look, I'm gonna do a deep dive into the quarterbacks once the season is over. So I'm not gonna make a definitive statement on that right now. But what I will say is wherever the Raiders pick, wherever they pick, 8th, 11th, 15th, that GM, that scouting department has to make the right decision. Because as I said, you could pick 8th and whiff, and the team that picks 12th may hit on a home run. How many top 5 picks have we seen not pan out? I'm in New York right now. I watched the Jets draft Sam Darnold 3rd overall. Didn't work. Zach Wilson drafted 2nd overall. Didn't work. You know what Patrick Mahomes was? He was a 10th overall pick. He wasn't 1. He was 10th. You know, Lamar Jackson. He was the last pick in the 1st round. Ravens have a good feeling. They have Aaron Rodgers, another example from way back. But Lamar Jackson more recently. He was the last pick. He was the 5th quarterback picked in the 1st round of his draft class. He's already won an MVP, which the other guys can't say. Josh Allen pretty good, hasn't won an MVP. So I'm just saying that regardless of, I'm going to say this again to be clear, because I know a lot of people are going to throw out names, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Drake May. Regardless of where the Raiders pick, the GM and the scouting department has to do a good job with their homework in the offseason. Because you can have the 3rd pick and whiff, you can have the 15th pick and hit. And this is one of the richest quarterback draft classes. A lot of people are saying, and I don't know how long, maybe the best quarterback draft class they can remember.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be top 5 necessarily to get a starting caliber quarterback. You just have to be able to identify who those starting caliber quarterbacks are.
That's right. Yeah, and people get hooked on names. They like certain players better. I understand that, and that's cool, you know. But just understand that, you know, if it's not Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, or May, don't worry. I mean, there's other guys there. Drake May will be a great quarterback too, but there's a lot of guys there, and so we'll see what the Raiders. You know, I think their chances, depending on what happens, if they don't do well this last 4 games, their chances of getting one of those 3 guys pretty good. I think it'd be pretty good. So keep it all in check there with that. All right, for our audio audience, we're going to take our last break. For our video audience, don't go anywhere. We're staying right here with you. We're live on YouTube and recorded on audio. So we appreciate you guys being. This is Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. You're with Scott. You're with Mo. We're coming back right after this. Okay, we're back. Silver and Black Today. Leo, what's going on? I see it says, what up, Scott? Finally, Mo, get to catch you guys live. Yes. We're live right before Mo goes out and heads in the limo, goes to Midtown, hangs out, has some avocado smoothies. Yeah, he's getting ready. Look at that. You just got a haircut, didn't you, man?
Fresh out of the barbershop about 2 hours ago.
Uh-huh.
It's that type of week. I just you know what? To be honest, Scott, not that I'm having a vacation, but this week I'm just going to go completely off the grid. Yeah, you won't hear from now. I'm going to do the post game show as I usually do.
Yes.
After Raiders Chargers, and then I'll have a Friday show, and after that, going complete dark mode. You won't hear from me for a few days, so get used to this face now.
That's good. That's good. He's got some business to take care of. So
business trip.
Yes, a business trip. Serious business too. So that's good. But we're back. We're talking Raiders now. Mo, we're going to switch gears now, and we're going to talk about the game Thursday night, the Thursday night game against the Chargers. We talked about the injuries to start the show, and the Raiders, you know, it's hard. And I don't have the emotional tie as a fan as many of the folks who listen to the show do. So it's been hard for me to be positive. I would like to think that the Raiders win this game. Okay. But they didn't score a point against the Vikings. You know, you look at that and you're like, wow, how can you have any sense of, confidence that the Raiders can beat the Chargers? Will Khalil Mack sack Aiden O'Connell 8 times this game, or are they finally? Remember, 2 offensive linemen are out. Andre James, Colton Miller out for the game. So it's going to be tough, and I think you're going to have to put. And I don't know, I haven't seen it, and I don't know that they can do it. You have to put some more emotion into this offense. You're going to have to do something else versus what you did last time against the Chargers, because Aiden O'Connell, as we talked about, is not a mobile guy. But I think they got to move him out of the pocket a little bit, Mo. Even if it's on a quick pass or something, they're going to need to do something different to negate not only Mack, but the fact that they are 2 offensive linemen short.
I expect to see a lot of double, triple teams on Khalil Mack to make sure he doesn't wreck the game again. Joey Bosa not in the field. Of course, Joey Bosa's on injured reserve.
Yeah.
But I have the Raiders winning this game 17-10. That's what I put on my Bleacher Report piece for the picks this week. 17-10, and I said, while the Raiders haven't scored more than 20 points in the game in a while since the Giants matchup in week 9, they're not going to have to score 20 to beat the Chargers. I think the Chargers are going to struggle to score points. I don't see the Chargers scoring more than 10, 13 points myself. So, because the Raiders defense is pretty good. Now the Chargers are without obviously Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, but the Raiders defense has been playing pretty good. As I said, I think still top 10 in scoring or points allowed. So
yeah,
I think it's going to be a defensive matchup. It's not going to be the most entertaining if you like points. But I feel like the Raiders, if you're a betting person out there, I feel like the Raiders cover the -3. And they have a pretty convincing victory. And I think it's going to be some momentum for Antonio Pierce as he still seeks to get that head coaching job. So I think it's going to be a Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers game. As you said, they're going to do something different than they did in the first matchup to make sure, again, Khalil Mack doesn't live in the backfield. But I've called for this for weeks now. I think the Raiders should start using more motion, start a little more window dressing to exploit some matchups on the field, because the Chargers defense isn't that good.
No.
I understand you may not be high on the Raiders offense because they didn't score against Minnesota. Minnesota has a top 10 scoring defense. The Chargers do not. The Chargers have one of the worst pass defenses in the league. So I'd want to see, you have nothing to lose. Let Aiden O'Connell sling it all over the field. He has the arm strength for it. You have Devontae Adams, you have Jacoby Myers, you have Hunter Renfrow. If you can hold on to the football, you have Trey Tucker, who needs to get on the field. You can sling it around the field and get it to your playmakers, Michael Mayer in the red zone, even outside the red zone. I want to see, let the coach staff should take the training wheels off at Aiden O'Connell, let him throw the football and live with the results. See what you get.
I would like to see a lot more of Trey Tucker over these last 4 games. Okay, he's now listen, I know he's got to make some improvements. His route running and his ability to hold on to the ball too. I mean, he's made some great catches, but also he's missed some. So I think I would like to see that. I'd like to see him spread it out. As crazy as it sounds, I'd like to not only see them do motion, Mo, but I'd like to see him spread it out. Do some 4 wide receiver sets. Get Tucker in there. You have Renfrow, Tucker. Just go in and just give him different looks. Just start throwing the kitchen sink. I mean, why not, right? Because you haven't been able to score damn points anyway. So come out, maybe they clean sheeted some plays. Or went deep in the playbook and said, all right, let's think of this differently. And I think the one thing we didn't see them do last week that we called for them to do on this show, and I think a lot of people who were looking at keys to victory over the Vikings, was to just stay aggressive, right? Both running the ball, passing the ball, and to your point, let him sling it around the field. What do you got to lose? You challenge the kid. Give him complex routes. Give him all sorts of stuff and see how he reacts.
As you said, what do they have to lose? Now, I just wanted to make a quick comment about Trey Tucker, because a lot of people are going to say, well, he can't hold on to the ball in balance. He's got to work on those sideline catches. He had a bobble in the last game. I understand that. But he's not going to get better at it in live action if he's on the sideline. He has to be on the field to actually put it into practice for him to get better at it. You don't get better by watching others do it. You have to actually do it. So I think having Trey Tucker on the field a little more, I think I'd want to see that. One thing they didn't do against the Vikings was test the defense downfield. I believe I saw a stat. The Raiders only threw 2 passes 15-plus yards down the field against the Vikings.
Right.
That has to change, and that goes along with my point. Let him sling it. Again, he has, while we talk, people don't like us talking about his lack of mobility, Aiden O'Connell does have a pretty decent arm.
Yeah, he does.
And we've seen it in the preseason. So
absolutely,
why not use that part of his skill set to open up the offense and get things rolling for your struggling unit right now?
And that's what I would do too. Is I would have a steady dose, and I would rotate him in. I mean, I know you're paying him a lot of money, and he had the fumble, but rotate in Hunter, and then when he takes a spell, put Tucker in. Like just keep pulling him around. Just keep doing it. And yes, I know Michael Mayer too. I would obviously do that. I've been calling that for weeks, and they seem to do it, and then they stop. Again, the inadequacy of the play caller. But I think that that's what they need to do. Just spread the ball all around. Hit Mayer, hit Tucker, hit Devontae, of course, and Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker. Just move the ball around and do things differently. And don't just use Tucker as a guy to run end arounds. I think that doesn't do him justice. You want to see him do some pre-snap motions, go out in a route, especially over the middle of the field, doing slants across the middle of the field, just hit him in stride. He's got the speed. That's what you want to see. Even short passes. Maybe sometimes they only go for 5-6 yards, but what the one time he gets a step on the defensive back or the linebacker and he's able to break one for 20 or 30 yards. That's what I want to see out of him.
And that's why you can get him in space with those motions, and I think that's where he can shine. Once he gets the ball in his hands, how many defenders are going to be able to track him down if they're trailing him?
Yeah,
Not many.
exactly.
So that short pass, I saw this with Justin Fields. I don't know if you remember the Monday Night Football game against the Vikings.
Yes.
Justin Fields did a lot of that, where it was just short passes, and he allowed his playmakers to rack up the yards after the catch, and that's how they got. I wouldn't say got him comfortable, but they were a little conservative on the conservative side with Justin Fields. Kind of showed me they didn't trust him, but I think you could do that with Aiden O'Connell just to get him comfortable, get him into a rhythm early in the game, and then as the game goes on, you start taking shots downfield.
Right. And I think they should do the same thing with Devontae. I mean, listen, the thing that's bothered me about the Raiders passing game all season long is where the routes go, right? We see a lot of routes down the sideline. We see a lot of routes within 5 yards of the sideline, even if it's an in. I don't see a lot of diagonal. I don't see a lot of slants. And I think Devontae even the same thing. If even on a short pass, get him out in the field, get him some momentum coming in towards the middle of the field and give him the ball. You've seen when he's gotten those passes what he's done with them. Now, of course, yes, you can hit him vertically too when he gets a step on a defensive back, especially the Chargers. But I just want to see more dynamic movement, and I want to see a more it's not even complex routes, Mo. It's just routes that are different than they've been running, these vertical straight routes or these quick ins, and that's it. Keep them moving. Keep these receivers going.
I'm a little concerned about how creative Bo Hardegree is going to be, knowing that he's not going to have two of his starting offensive linemen. So you mentioned it early in the show: no Colton Miller, no Andre James, but they will be moving Dylan Parham to center, and I think that's I think that is going to be his natural position. I said it when Dylan Parham was a rookie. Played very well at the center position. I think that's his future spot. But I'm worried that because they don't have two of their starters up front, that they're going to be a little too conservative and not get creative. And I think against this Chargers defense, which is on the weak side, let's be honest, this is the type of defense you can get creative on. Not to say you get too cute, but you can try some things and experiment and get some explosive plays on this unit. I think they just have to take the training wheels off of Aiden O'Connell. As I said, let him sling it all over the field.
Well, and we said this about the Chargers the last time they played too, though, and then you had Matt go crazy. But I look, I think they're even worse than they were before, and that whole house is falling down. Brandon Staley's going to be out. You lose your quarterback. That just sucks the air out of the room. And so I look, this game is prime for the Raiders to win, and they need to win it. So I think that you just end that losing streak. For those of you who are really opining for Antonio Pierce to get the job, he's got to win this game, in my view, because it's set up for him nicely. And as long as they have a good game plan, they execute on the field, and that's on the players, then I think they do. I'm with you, 17-10, somewhere like that, 21-14, whatever it may be. But it's important for them to do. And I think it's important for this offense to have something positive. They've not had any positive, really, consistently all season long. A couple stretches here and there, but since the Giants game, they really haven't done much. So I think that they need that. They need, from a psyche perspective, to go out there. And even though I don't think they'll overly dominate LA, I do think they can feel good about themselves if they execute, get first downs, score when they're in the red zone, that sort of stuff.
Here's what the Raiders can do: finish the game without scoring any points. I mean, obviously, but as you said, this offense needs to feel good about itself. It needs some momentum. I don't care if you're on the side where you want the Raiders to tank or win football games. This offense needs to show something because the other thing that a lot of people are not talking about is what if Devontae Adams doesn't believe in the direction of this team? And then you start to hear him chirp about maybe not being happy and possibly wanting a trade. I'm not saying you do this to make Devontae happy, but part of this is also to say, hey, Devontae, we're trying our best and we've made some progress. Stick it out with us as
Yes.
you said you would,
Yeah.
and we'll get this right. We'll
Right.
eventually get this right. And I think that's also plays into it why you don't want to just go out there and just tank. Now I know tanking is not something that's talked about among league offices. It's more of a media thing. But I think it's these last 4 games where a lot of fans have checked out and they're already looking toward the draft because I can see the comments right now and everyone's asking me about this quarterback, this draft strategy, draft strategy. Shout out to GB Ware in the chat. But the Raiders still have 4 games left to play, and as I wrote in the piece, there are still some questions that they can answer. And I think a lot of it is on offense because defense is playing well. You want to see that offense at least finish on a strong note.
Yes. And you know what? I'm going to call it now, right? I'm wrong plenty. Although a lot of times I get comments and they say I'm wrong, but they're actually wrong. But nonetheless, there's some joking here. Relax, folks. Hating on people. Hate. I hate when
By the
people
way,
use
the
it.
person in the chat is G Ware B. I wanted to get that right. That person's
I
been
call
very
I call
consistent
I
with
call
comments.
I call him Guareb.
I just said G Ware.
I
I
know.
didn't want to try to pronounce it, but G Ware B.
Yes. I think he's actually pretty happy right now because he's always wanted them to do poorly so they get a better draft pick, right, Guareb? I'm pretty
let,
sure because there was a couple
let,
times when I commented to him in during live shows like post game shows and said, "Dude, if you're not enjoying this, why are you watching it?" But he's a good dude. It's just
yeah.
I like to see him in there talking about other
most
stuff.
most of our listeners are
They're
good
great.
people.
They're all good people.
Of course, anywhere you go, you're gonna have some bad apples in the batch. But like I said, I enjoy the chat. That's why I do the Bleacher Report lives. I
Yes.
know John 585 may be listening to this or watching this. Shout out to him. He was very active in the Bleacher Report chat earlier. I don't know if Cheyenne Santana is on this or watching this, but she's very active on the Bleacher Report live when I'm there. So what? Listen, I understand a lot of what's being said in the comment section, but sometimes we just have to understand there's also another side of it. And everyone has their opinion. Everyone's not going to agree with you. I understood that from day one doing this. And it's good to have a discussion, a respectful
Of course.
discussion.
Of
So
course.
I just want to say before I go off the grid, thank everyone in the chat for coming through and giving your comments, whether
Hey,
you disagree with us
if
or dislike us or whatever the case may be. It's
if you
cool. It's all
dislike
good.
us, watch us too. I could care less. But as long as you're watching, it's good for me. I mean, Howard Stern built his whole career that way. Um, Mo, are you going off the grid or something? Because you've only talked about it like 14 times.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go completely
Mm.
dark after the Raiders Chargers game. We're gonna go into a cave and just not come out for a few days. It just kind of because the Raiders have a very weird December schedule,
They
right?
do.
So
Yeah.
they played last. Remember, they had a bye to begin the month. Then they played last week. Then they play tomorrow on a short week.
4 days.
Then they're off till Christmas
Yes.
when they go to
Yeah.
Arrowhead.
Yeah.
And then they have I believe the Colts on New
Yep.
Year's Eve
New Year's Eve in
in
Indianapolis.
Indianapolis on Eastern time zone. So
Correct.
very weird December schedule for the
They
Raiders.
play on my time zone. I like that. Oh, by the way, we did have a commenter who said we have no business talking about the Raiders because we're not covering practice every day. Did you know that?
Yeah, I didn't know that was a prerequisite for talking about a football team because if that was the case, there wouldn't be a lot of media people talking about football because a lot of
Yeah.
people aren't at practice.
Adam Schefter. How can he cover the NFL? He's not there every day. Anyway, good fun. But yeah, listen, I think for fans too, and I see it a lot in the comments. A lot of our listeners too, is the fact that they're just tired of losing, and I get it. And so now you're looking at the spec, and I think to me, all seriousness aside, from the perspective of can Antonio Pierce be a good coach, is that he's in house. People like him, so it's like at least you like him. So do we want to go through who they're hiring and all that? I understand that kind of fatigue because it is fatigue, right? So you got Gruden, then that fell apart. Then you get McDaniels as a disaster and that falls apart. So people are just, and then you go back and back and back for coaches, Del Rio before him, and it gets frustrating. So I understand people's point of view on that, and it makes sense, but we'll see. I mean, again, you have an opportunity, and you were saying it best too. This is the last thing I want to say about the Antonio Pierce audition, because I had people really on top of me saying, "Well, you don't even let him finish yet." And I said, no, he gets to finish. I'm just saying after 5 games, I don't think he's earned it yet. That's all I've said. He's lost 3 in a row. If this was another coach who was a dick, would people say, oh, he's lost 3, he sucks? I mean, look what you're saying about Paul Hardigree. Like, he hasn't done well. Nobody wants to keep him. So I don't know. We'll see where that goes. But I do think that you have to wait it out and see what happens. I mean, maybe he'll pull the rabbit out and they'll win 4 in a row. Who knows?
It's funny you went there, because I was going to say, before we close out, I just want to say that I want to make this clear to people in the chat. People in the chat, if you got headphones in your ear, take your headphones out. Just listen to me for a quick minute and listen very closely. Okay. My take on Antonio Pierce right now is it's to be determined, TBD. I'm not saying you crown him now. And I'm not saying you dismiss him as a candidate right now.
Right.
The Raiders have 4 games left to play. The only definitive statement that I said was, if he loses out, if the Raiders lose out and don't win another football game, and he goes 2-7 as an interim head coach, he's not getting the job. Show me the list of interim head coaches who've won less than 25% of their games and got the job. That's not going to happen. So that was the only definitive statement that I made over the past week. If the Raiders lose out and look awful, not scoring any points, and start giving up points, he's not getting the job. But his audition is still going on. We can't crown him as the head coach. We can't dismiss him. His audition is still ongoing. The interview process has started for him already, and he's still, in his terms, in the middle of it, because right now he has 4 games left. I mean, he's 2-3 right now as an interim head coach. So he's got time to figure it out and turn it around and help his resume. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, no, and that's what I've said. I just said at this point in time, because to me, that's why I look at it. And I always try to use analogies, right? And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So let's see if this one works. But if let's say you work, I'm trying to think of just a really common place. Let's say you work at a grocery store and you're an assistant manager, right? And your grocery store just isn't doing well. Sales are down. You really have to you have to really do well in the meat department to make your store profitable. And it's just not going well. It's been a year, it's been 2 years, and the store is losing money. So the corporate people come in and they say, you know what, manager, you're gone. So what we're going to do is, hey, produce manager, we like you. You're a good dude. People love you. You're now the store manager. Okay. So we want you to turn this around. So they're going to give him an opportunity to do that. And then if sales are still down, and maybe there's a little increase, maybe there's a 10% increase, maybe there's a 20%, or maybe there's a 50% increase. Maybe this was his opportunity and he just goes nuts and that store turns profitable, right? What you can't say is, if you're that guy and nothing improves, is you can't say, well, I didn't hire the meat guy and I didn't hire the checkers. Those weren't my people, so how can you blame me? No, it's the opportunity, right? And this is where Antonio Pierce is. You can't say, well, he got this crap from McDaniels. It's all true, absolutely. McDaniels didn't do a good job, and he inherited. But you go into the opportunity knowing that it's a tough one. And maybe he's the man to do it. Maybe, just maybe, he is. The jury is out. As you said, Mo, we don't know for sure. For Raider fans, my wish is that he succeeds and becomes the coach. Why? Because that would mean that the Raiders finish strong, and that's good for everybody, including guys who host a podcast about the Raiders. Because we don't like going into December and January and nobody cares anymore. Trust me. So that's from a selfish perspective. But I do think that analogy works, because you inherit what you have, and what makes people special is they take crap and they turn it into a Da Vinci.
And I think one thing we didn't mention in the piece from Tasham Radio Athletic, Mark Davis did acknowledge that Antonio Pierce did inherit No,
Bad
he said
situation.
bad situation,
Yeah,
a tough situation to
he
turn
knows
around.
that. Yeah.
He understands that, and that he said he will factor that into the interview process. So we understand that. Davis understands that. Pierce understands that. But you got to look at it. People will say, "Well, Pierce has a mess, and how can he even have a shot at the head coaching position?" You have to think of it this way: if you're Antonio Pierce, where else were you going to get a shot to be a head coach in the NFL? Who
Nowhere.
was gonna before this happened? Who was gonna hire Antonio Pierce to be a head coach in the NFL? This may lead to a defensive coordinator position for him somewhere. It could lead. He could still become the head coach of the Raiders. Who knows? So he knew it was a tough situation, but he took it on because it's an opportunity to get his foot in the door. We talked about having the lack of black coaches around the NFL all the time and how
Mm-hmm.
they don't get fair interviews. Well, Antonio Pierce, albeit in a tough situation, has a chance to at least show how he can clean up a big mess that Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler left behind. And I think that's why you take the opportunity, even though it's a tough hill to climb.
Correct. And he said as much, by the way. I don't know if everybody out there, some people like watching the press conferences, some people don't. I understand it's inside baseball for us. We listen to it for insights so that we can come talk to you guys. It's not the most entertaining thing, but Antonio Pierce is as real as it gets, man. He tells it like it is. He knows what he's facing. He knows what the challenge was. So he didn't go into it with kind of stars in his eyes thinking, oh, I'm going to be the head coach. I just have to be a nice guy and blah, blah. No, he knew he had to show something. He knew he had to show this team making progress. And that's overall, not just the defense, but the offense, winning games. Yeah, if they went 500, does that mean that he doesn't get the job? No, he might get the job. Who knows? If you can show that you made progress and people, and with the bag of crap you were handed, then great. So I don't think he wants it anyway. Antonio Pierce is not the kind of guy, and I don't know him personally clearly, but I can tell from his personality, he's not the guy who wants to be handed anything. He wants to earn it. He did it when he was a player. He did it as a high school coach. He did it as a college coach. So, he's not going to quit. He's going to give it everything he has for those people who say you want to tank. Guy wants to earn a job. He's not going to tank. So for everybody's sake, it would be great if he did. And we'll close it on that because he's got the opportunity, and we'll see how it goes over the next 4 games.
Scott, one last point.
Mm-hmm.
Antonio Pierce was undrafted out of Arizona.
Yes.
Right? So you don't think he's used to having the odds stacked against him? Undrafted out of Arizona, became a Super Bowl champion. So my point of bringing that up is, yeah, he inherited a crap situation. But he's used to fighting against the odds and overcoming it. You can't look at a situation as like, oh, he's going to fail. You have to look at it as, well, what if I succeed?
Exactly.
What if I succeed? Because
Right.
before the losing streak, I brought the parallel to him and John Madden. John Madden was a defensive coordinator on the collegiate level. Then he was the Raiders linebackers coach. Then he became the Raiders head coach. And I said, if Antonio Pierce becomes the Raiders head coach, he will be following in the same pathway as John Madden. And it's quite possible. Now, again, Is it a rare feat? Yes. But this is the same guy, as I just said, who came out of Arizona undrafted and became a Super Bowl champion. I don't think he's worried about the odds being stacked against him.
No. And it's interesting. I'm seeing some comments in the live YouTube chat about, well, if we get a new coaching staff, that means it's a complete rebuild. No,
not necessarily.
It's not true. Did DeMarco Ryans have a rebuild? I mean, he went in. He doesn't even have a full roster. And look what he's done in his first year. They didn't blow everybody out of there.
You don't even have to go to the Texans. When Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler came aboard, was that a rebuild in year one? They kept Derek Carr,
and they
acquired Davante Adams, and signed Chandler Jones. They were building on what the previous regime had done. That wasn't a rebuild year one. Now, it didn't work, so then they had to take a step back and rebuild it. But they came in year one, and it wasn't a rebuild. They saw the good in the roster. Now, that year, they were coming off of a playoff team, and this team is probably not going to the playoffs. But if you can look at the roster and see the good parts of it, Davante Adams, Jacoby Myers, Max Crosby, Tyree Wilson coming along, you don't necessarily have to break it all down and go completely from scratch.
Yeah, people throwing names. Harbaugh can go to Chicago. Costas wants Dan Quinn. I don't understand the fascination with Dan Quinn. I don't get it.
Dan Quinn, I'll speak for Costas on this one. Correct me if I'm wrong, Costas. But Dan Quinn, I will say, he knows how to build a coaching staff. When he was at Atlanta and Atlanta went to the Super Bowl, guess who he had on his staff? He had Mike McDaniel, who's the current head coach of the Dolphins. He had Kyle Shanahan, who we all know coaches the San Francisco 49ers. He had Raheem Morris, and he had another guy who's now a head coach. I'm not sure, the name is blanking me right now, but
Costas
he
will know.
knows.
Drop
He
it in the
knows.
chat.
I talk about this all the time about Bleacher Report lives. Dan Quinn, although he's a defensive mind, knows how to build a coaching staff. Again, he had multiple future head coaches on his staff in Atlanta. So I can see the fascination with Dan Quinn, and that Cowboys defense is looking pretty good right now. So again, I understand it, but I
Defense
think
is
Patrick.
looking good, but how long ago? How long ago? So who was his offensive? Mike McDaniel was on the offensive staff. He wasn't the coordinator, right?
No, it was Kyle
Yeah,
Shanahan was the offensive
Shanahan.
coordinator. Mike
Shanahan.
McDaniel was on the staff as an assistant. So
Okay, okay.
he had two guys who a
You're
lot of people
educating
are.
me.
He had two guys in Mike McDaniel and Kyle Shanahan who a lot of people are copycatting right now. He knows
Yes,
how to build
very
a
true.
coaching staff. So Costas, I totally get you on that one. I totally understand it.
Yes. Okay. I buy in. I was ignorant to that, so I'll admit that I didn't. I just was like, I don't know why people keep talking about Dan Quinn. So my friend Mo, before he goes off the grid, has educated me. So I appreciate that. Before he goes silent, I can't hit him up.
Yeah, you know, Scott, I'm always just a ping away. I ignore a lot of people. Scott, you're not one of them, but I do
I
ignore a lot of people.
understand that. I understand that, and I appreciate that. So you got the Raiders winning this game. I do too. I picked the Raiders last week, and I was close. They only lost by 3. Too soon.
Too soon, Scott. Too soon.
Too soon. Oh, thank you, MDM. We appreciate the comments saying we have the best Raider show. There's a lot of good Raider shows. And speaking of that, too, while Mo's off the grid, although he's going to sneak in a show next week, we will have a show early next week at some point. I think we're doing Tuesday or something like that. But I will be in Tennessee. I will be in Nashville, and I will be on Murph's Raiders Fan Radio. I'll be there. We're going to do like a crossover show. We're going to take the audio, put it on our feed the next day as well. So pray for me because those guys get a little crazy.
Jeff might drop kick you if you get out of hand over there. So just saying.
Yeah. Jeff, who thought I think he said he's 5'6". You're 5'8", Mo. You're 5'10". Sorry, he's 5'8" or 6 or something like that.
With Tim's on 5'10". I'm not quite 5'10", but with Tim's
So
on.
Tim,
We wear Tim's out here in New York, out here in Brooklyn. We're not part of gentrified Brooklyn. We still wear Tim boots out here when it gets cold. So I'm usually about 5'10", 5'9".
Gentrified. You're not. You mean you're not in gentrified Brooklyn?
No, I'm far from gentrified Brooklyn.
I have heard this on occasion, by the way.
I know where to find the avocado smoothies,
Mo,
but I have
duck.
to travel. I have to travel to get the avocado smoothies where I'm at.
I'm sure. I think you just sell them on the street, man. Get a little cart. Nobody will buy them, right? But hey, you could drink them all day.
Yeah. You see the plaque behind me. It's all about the hustle, man. All about the hustle. You see the plaque.
We have Tony Sheffield says Mo for president.
I wouldn't want that job. Unless it's president of the Raiders, I'll take that job. President of the country, I'll leave that to the politicians because that's a dirty job.
Yeah, well, you're ethical, so you couldn't be president.
I'm a little too honest too.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. To get elected these days, hey. But we don't talk politics here. We'll save that for people who want to go nuts. I do love when I post Raider stuff in social media, and then people come back with like a comment like that's unrelated about politics. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what? I said something about Max Crosby, and then you go off about some weird tangent. I have no idea. I don't know. I worry about society sometimes, Mo, but I don't worry about our listeners or viewers because they're all good people.
As I told Paul Rader in the chat, this is why I'm going on a darkness retreat. Aaron Rodgers had the right idea. I'm going to go into a cabin. It's going to be completely dark. No TV, no phone, no computer, no tablet, no nothing. Just me and my thoughts in the darkness to clear my mind and then finish off the Raiders season strongly with their last 3 games, starting with their game on Christmas against the Chiefs.
There you go. Will Raiders give their fans a Christmas gift of beating Patrick Mahomes? Hey, look, the Chiefs are in trouble. So we'll see. I mean, the Broncos beat the Lions this week, and I don't think the Chiefs will lose to the Patriots, but they're right on the tails of the Chiefs in the division. It's crazy.
It's a topsy-turvy year in terms of teams that could sneak into the playoffs. You got a lot of backup quarterbacks. A lot of starting quarterbacks are hurt this year.
Oh, yeah.
So the Raiders aren't getting any breaks in these except for the Chargers tomorrow. The Raiders aren't really getting any breaks in their last three because the Chiefs obviously battling for playoff seeding. The Colts are battling for playoff seeding with a backup quarterback. And the Denver Broncos, as you just mentioned, are playing pretty well, and they're battling for playoff seeding. So I think if you're Antonio Pierce and you look at these last four games, if you can beat three of your division rivals, I think Mark Davis would really like that. I think that would really help him as far as going into his office and saying, look, I know we didn't make the playoffs this year, but we just knocked off three of our division rivals. I know how to beat our division rivals. I've done it.
Yep.
I can't just not just saying it to put it on a wall. I've actually done it. So I think again, very important for Antonio Pierce to get some wins on the board.
Absolutely. By the way, Seamus Harrington in the chat. Hey, Seamus, what's going on? Love the name. What's your guys' upset of the week? Now, Mo does a betting column, so we'll ask him too. He needs a good one for him picking. I'm going to pick one first, Mo. You tell me what you think of this one. You ready? By the way, in the sport, Mo doesn't take part in the Sports Not picks because he does it on Bleacher Report. But all of us on Sports Not, do you remember how terrible I was at the beginning of the year? I'm now only 2 games behind. 7 out of the lead on picks this year. So I'm doing well with the picks. We won't talk about fantasy football because I'm doing terrible. But I will tell you this, Seamus. I think the Rams win.
It's not an upset pick, Scott.
It's not an upset?
No, that's not an upset. They're favored by like 6.5 points.
Okay, so you caught me. No, give your upset first. Give your upset first, and then I'll give my real upset.
So I have 6 upsets against the spread.
6?
I have 6 upsets. If you're betting against the spread, remember, this is not straight up, but against the spread, I have 6 upsets against the spread. I have the Vikings covering against the Bengals, but the Bengals winning. I have the Broncos covering against the Lions. I think that, to me, is what I feel best about. That line, I think, was 5 when I got it. It's now down to 4. The Lions haven't been playing well recently. I think the Broncos, if they don't win outright, I think they at least cover against the Lions. The other upset, I have the Giants covering against the Saints. Wouldn't be surprised if the Saints lose that game.
Yes.
They got some guys coming back in Taysom Hill and Rashid Shaheed, but the Saints aren't a juggernaut. The Giants can definitely cover. I'm in New York City. Everyone is toasting Tommy DeVito out here.
Cutlets.
So, yes. So I think the Giants are going to cover, if not win outright. I have the Bears covering against the Browns. The Browns have they have a bunch of injuries, offensive line, defense, a lot of guys out for the Browns. The Bears, as I said early in the show, have been playing well. They can run the ball with the quarterback and Justin Fields or their trio of running backs. I think the Bears pull off the outright upset against the Browns, who are very injury riddled right now. The other upset, which is to me is not really an upset, but by the line, the Cowboys are underdogs to the Bills, -2. I'm picking the Cowboys to win that game. I don't understand the line, -2 in favor of the Bills. I understand they just beat the Chiefs, but the Bills, to me, I'm not sold on them. A lot of people had them in the Super Bowl. I think they got some problems in there. Article came out about Sean McDermott.
The Cowboys are a 500 team away from home.
Look, I'm taking the Cowboys outright to beat the Bills.
That's the only one I disagree with you on. I think the Bills are
underdogs. I'm taking the Cowboys. If you remember.
Go ahead.
If you remember, Scott, we both had the Cowboys. I believe we both had the Cowboys making it to the NFC Championship game this year.
We did. I had them going to the Super Bowl.
They're playing pretty well.
I had them going to the Super Bowl.
I had the 49ers in that spot because I still think they're going to have problems with the 49ers when they get there. But
yes,
I'm picking them over the Bills. So, person in the chat, forgot who it was. Those are my upset picks.
I'm with you. And if anybody in the chat tonight or listening to the show is one of those kind of car people, oh my God. We're not doing it because of Derek Carr. Well, partly.
No.
And I say because of how the Saints are playing. I think the Giants have kind of started to put together a little bit. And you can say what you want about Tommy DeVito. But that kid, and by the way, what did Tommy DeVito? Tommy DeVito has one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. And why is he successful, Mo?
He's able to use his legs. He ran for 71 yards. I'm not saying you have to have a quarterback that runs
to live.
Right. I'm not saying you have to run
by
for
design.
50 yards. I'm talking functionally mobile. It helps. It definitely helps, when your offensive line breaks down, or if you have a bunch of cluster injuries along the offensive line, it helps when your quarterback is able to move. And as you said, me picking the Giants to cover has nothing to do. I know people are going to bring up Derek Carr, but just look at the Saints this year. They haven't been as good as a lot of people thought they were. I thought the Saints were going to win the division. Mm-hmm. They've been a disappointment. And right now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are leading the division with Baker Mayfield, who I wanted the Raiders to sign, by the way.
With the same record. And by the way, the Saints are one game better than the Raiders in the win-loss column. But
So
I like the Giants there too. Are you ready for this one?
go ahead.
Are you ready?
I'm
This will
ready.
knock your socks off.
The
That
Jets.
Patriots defense is playing well, Mo.
Scott. Scott.
I'm not saying against the spread. I'm just
Scott.
saying. I'm just saying. Bill Belichick, he's coming towards the end.
You know what's funny, Scott? I actually initially had the Patriots covering against the Chiefs,
Yeah.
but then I read a report that Robert Kraft has already made the decision that Bill Belichick is out, and I'm
Yeah.
sure players saw that. And if you're
Mm.
a player, you have a lame duck head coach.
That's a good point.
I just don't think his voice is going to carry as much as it used to, with these reports coming out that the Patriots are basically going to move on from Bill Belichick. There have been a lot of fans saying, "Hey Mo, if the Patriots indeed move on from Bill Belichick, do the Raiders hire him?" And I say, no. Bill Belichick's drafts have not been good. Coach of
Correct.
defense, drafts have
Correct.
been awful.
Right. But I'm going to anyway. I'm going to put down a little parlay for you.
Uh-oh.
Taking the Patriots, the Bears, and the Titans.
Actually, that's not a bad parlay against the spread. I can
That
actually get because, like I said, I almost picked the Patriots to cover because it's a 9 point or nine and a
it's
half
9.
point
Yeah,
spread,
and the Chiefs just can't score.
and they can't score. So that would be a decent parlay.
Mm. And
But
I don't even write a column.
I don't know what the status of CJ Stroud is going to be Sunday. And
Yeah,
people are
that's
listening
that's
like
the key. That's the key.
people
And even if he does play, is he going to be 100%? I don't know.
he doesn't have his playmakers either. Nico Collins is banged up. Tank Dell injured reserve.
And the tight end. What am I thinking? Forgetting
Dalton
his name.
Schultz
Dalton Schultz. Yeah.
back at
So
practice. I think he'll play though.
okay, we'll see how it goes. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us tonight. We appreciate you guys being with us and doing a little bit of the live thing tonight and giving you the podcast on video early because before Mo goes out and eats the magic mushrooms and looks into the woods, no, I'm just kidding. He's not doing that. But we wanted to be able to do that and hook up with you guys before the game tomorrow. So enjoy the game. Mo and I both have the Raiders winning this one at home. We will be live tomorrow night after the show here on the show. Myself and Murph, I will be on location at a cigar lounge, actually, with a bunch of guys around. So it's going to be pretty rowdy when I do the show, which will be kind of fun. But anyway, we'll be doing that. And then we'll get back with you. We'll get a show out to you probably Tuesday, probably later than usual. But it'll be there Tuesday. And then I'll be with Murph and the crew on Wednesday. So stay tuned for all that. We'll put it up in the social channels and make sure you guys know where we're at. But we certainly appreciate you guys being with us. Mo, enjoy your downtime. Excuse me. As I cough, I'm supposed to press the cough button when I do that. But anyway, we're live, so what the heck. But enjoy yourself, man, and we will tune in to you tomorrow as well with your Bleacher Report, which you go live exactly. Boom, whistle goes. A couple minutes later, there's Mo talking it up. So we'll be there, so make sure you catch that. And I know, go read, we talked about his column here on the show, but go check out Mo on Sportsnot as well. What else you got going on? Anything?
Nothing else. Just to remind
Nice.
people, check in with me at Bleacher Report Live right after the Chargers game, as you said. I'll see you on the other side of the darkness retreat. We'll talk Raiders Chiefs after I come out from the darkness.
There you go. We'll see what happens. He might come back with his hair might be blonde, or you never know what's going to happen.
You never know. Might come back with types of gold around my neck. I don't know. Got one chain now. I may come back with 5 chains.
5 chains.
Maybe a ring on my finger. I don't know.
Well, 2 chains is taken, so you can't do.
2. Yeah, it can't be 2 chains.
No,
So that's why I said 5.
It could be 5 chains.
It could be 5 chains.
Or you could just be Mo chains.
Mo chains. I was just getting ready to say that. Mo chains.
All right, my friend. I will talk to you soon, buddy.
Talk to you soon.
All right, for all of us here, including our producer Mike Robier, who is behind the scenes all the time, but let me tell you, he's a magic man behind the scenes for us with the show, so we appreciate him very much. But most of all, we appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for being with us live, being in the chat, keeping us laughing, keeping us honest when we're wrong, which is hardly ever. But that's okay. We still love you, even though you're always wrong. But we appreciate it. Honestly, you guys' support means everything to us. So for Mo, and I'm Scott Gulbransen. This has been Silver and Black today. Take care, everybody.